I want to express the importance of conscious communication during all of our life, really, because there's such power in words. We don't even realize when we might be harming someone. And it's so important to put ourselves maybe in a more compassionate way of thinking rather than immediately jumping into judgment. So I hope, that is my hope anyway, for this video, is to help y'all this holiday season navigate some of the more sticky conversations that may have us not wanting to go to family events or religious events with our family, or even work obligations, right? Because especially throughout COVID, there was a lot of separation. We have this odd world that we live in where everything is at our fingertips with social media and such like that, but true connections are getting lost. The strength and quality of our connections are suffering greatly because of this interface that is between us. We don't necessarily even have to take accountability for our actions a lot of times by dropping hurtful comments in the comment section on post or something like that. So remember, words do have meaning, and it's so vital that we aren't causing harm. If you caught my last video on YouTube, it was sort of like a polarizing moment for me and brought back a little bit of trauma, but I was able to unpack it and find the lessons within that interaction. And so I'm hoping that through this example and some of the tips and tricks that I'm going to provide, it'll help you prepare for the holiday gatherings ahead. I'm sure you've already been experiencing some because it starts at Thanksgiving, if not before, for us in the US. But I know for a fact that I've experienced a lot of reluctance going to both family and social events with friends and people that I might not necessarily know that well, and even going back into more religious events. This time of year can bring up triggers for a lot of people around that, especially if you were raised in a not so loving religion environment. I was raised Pentecostal Christian, and it was rough, needless to say. But that's not the topic of today's conversation. You could always check that out a little bit more on my blog. But one of the things that I want to emphasize is to go in from a place of love. But as we're living in this presence, being present in our bodies, being present in the moment, and living from love, living from the heart center, we can do that without being a doormat, and by having stronger boundaries that also honor our own personal energy levels. And sometimes it may come to the point where we have to cut ties with some of those more harmful relationships, which can be a very hard thing to grasp. And we do have to go through a mourning period. And typically around this time of year, I am talking about grief and loss because I've had multiple close friends and family members pass away very close to the holidays. And unfortunately, here I am yet again, having lost some people very close to me, a mentor, and even their lovely little dogs. So it's a little bit too raw for me. I'm not going to unpack that right now. But anyone that has experienced loss during this time period, know that my heart's with you and you are surrounded with love. at all times. So back to the topics. So the main thing is having some techniques in your arsenal for interacting with challenging individuals. We first need to know how to manage our own personal well-being. That's going to be the biggest thing. Know your boundaries, manage expectations in those situations as well. You know, if you don't want to get caught in a 3-hour conversation, say, hey, I'm just going to drop by for 15 minutes. I'd love to see you, but I have a lot of things going on right now. Something like that can really start to put a boundary around your time and your energy by stating up front what you are expecting or willing to give in a certain situation. So knowing what you need first, as well as your closest loved ones, that's going to be your highest priority. And know your limit. And always, have an idea of what is going to be your triggers or your most polarizing moments. So you sort of have a little bit of an idea of what could happen. That being said, we were talking about words having meaning. We can also manifest certain situations just by overthinking them and dreading them happening. If you're anything like me, you dread a lot of holidays because of the interactions that come with them. So I want to make sure that we're not calling in certain interactions, but making sure that what's going to probably bring some triggers and what might cause some issues for you as we navigate this holiday season. So one of the tricks for approaching interactions is assume good intent in conversations. My brain's going in 5 different directions, so apologies. But promoting active listening is a good way of doing that. Instead of going in judgmentally, dreading the whole interaction, assume good intent with conversations. And we'll get into a couple of other reasons why this may be the case, because some people may just be totally oblivious to how they are, right? Also, encourage speaking from personal experience rather than ideology. That's always going to be, or has historically been, one of the biggest issues with holiday events, is you get a bunch of different people from different backgrounds or different walks of life in one space, and they all have different ideologies, right? They have different political views, they have different religious views, they even have different views on how to raise kids, right? Or what you should be doing as a job. That's a very, very common experience that I've had, was based in education, religion, and what are you doing next with your life? And sometimes that can be very, very difficult to talk about when, especially if you're like me, you choose a different path. You become an entrepreneur, or you're, in a field that's not necessarily the most direct path to what is perceived as success. So knowing your boundaries and being able to have the confidence around yourself can be important in those situations. Also, having someone on your team, this could be a partner, this could be a friend, even having someone across the room that you can signal to say, hey, come save me or call me over. That can be a good way. And also know that a lot of times word or actions can speak louder than words. And in this, sometimes no answer can be an answer. And I've experienced this a lot. as I'm navigating certain relationships, I reach out, then I don't hear anything back, then I worry what I did and stuff like that. So, sometimes those actions speak louder than words. And in those cases, start pouring your energy, your time by watering other plants, other relationships that you may have. Because unfortunately, no is still an answer, or no answer is still an answer in that viewpoint. So we already talked about real world, real time interactions versus online interactions, but I want to also speak upon the comparison culture that we're experiencing a lot of right now. Because of social media, we often see what everyone else is doing in the most illuminated or most perfect light, right? It may not be what's going on truly behind the scenes. So keep that in mind and know that if you're happy, if you're doing what fills you up, that is going to be the most important thing. It doesn't matter if you have the largest, tallest tree or you have the best decorations on your block or whatever. Do what feels good and what you have actual energy for. Because if you're constantly burning yourself out and putting yourself, I made a post earlier about how if certain traditions or obligations or certain things do not serve your family anymore, you are allowed to discard those. Because if they are mentally affecting you, physically affecting you, or even affecting your finances, they're not serving you. And so instead of going into the new year burnout, financially in the hole, and, just totally stressed out, make some subtle switches, or maybe not so subtle switches, right? Because we can get so dug into the comparison of, we used to call it keeping up with the Joneses back down south. I don't know if there's other folks out there that have heard that sort of euphemism, but keeping up with the Joneses basically was, getting the biggest and best of everything to make sure that you're keeping up with your neighbor. And we have to worry about keeping up with what we need and what is serving us, not being the Kardashians. If I guess that's our more modern association now. But also, really, I encourage you to reach out to those that may be more lonely at this time of year, even social media contacts, because separation can be extremely difficult for people at this time of year. Not only do we have longer, darker days, colder weather, sicknesses going around, there's also people that are experiencing incredible loss and loneliness. So I do encourage you to reach out, again, within your own boundaries. Don't overextend yourself, but even just a kind word, or, dropping off soup or something like that to someone that is more lonely might brighten their day. So let's get into navigating some of those more difficult relationships. 1 second. Well, I can't find the tissues. Oh, well. We'll do old fashioned. Excuse me. All right. So navigating relationships. I definitely encourage some self-reflection on why you're maintaining certain relationships, especially the ones that seem like a struggle and are sapping your energy from you, because your energy is so important and vital. It is your life at its core. And we want to make sure that you're able to enjoy everything to its fullest rather than letting, emotional vampires, energy vampires suck all of your joy out of your life, right? So look at some of these relationships and see if they're even worth maintaining. Also, it may be great, we already talked about this a little bit, to set boundaries in advance, especially about time commitments or even conversation topics, because, maybe be like, hey, mom, can you not bring up that certain topic? Or dad, can you not ask your partner about the job and search, how it's going or something like that, because it's really tough to talk about. So maybe having some of those small little seeds can help direct. We don't want people walking on eggshells, but if we can detour some of the more difficult conversations, if that's something that's available for you to go ahead and do, try it. Okay, so also understanding the differences between you and others. This can address dealing with diverse political and value-based opinions, because sometimes you may be talking to an older aunt or uncle or something like that, and they are bashing millennials or Gen Z or Gen X or whatever all the new names are. But instead of bashing certain generations, let's look at why certain values are important to them, because it may not just be, I want to live the old way, or I don't want certain people being as prominent as they are, or something like that. This could be within gender conversations or spiritual conversations or anything. So, sometimes it can just be nostalgia. They saw certain things as simpler during a certain time. Maybe they don't understand how neurodivergency works, or the job market these days, or something like that. So instead of like jumping to conclusions and becoming defensive about a very pointed conversation topic, sort of ask them what is most important. That is part of that active listening that I was talking about. So actually asking them, hey, I'm curious about why you're defending this certain viewpoint, or why you're talking about this in this manner. It might work. That's a very difficult conversation to have for sure, but knowing why certain values create certain opinions can be vital in this setting. Also, advocate giving others the benefit of the doubt and keeping an open mind. This goes back to the value-based opinions and stuff like that. Also, it comes to the fact, is this actually worth your time to educate? Is it worth your time and energy to educate these people in a different viewpoint? Because some people are just trying to be triggery. Some people are just trying to be, the polarizing person in the room. So, definitely look at what others are currently feeling or needing, and what their belief system and value system is. And because we really need to, there's so much separation that's happening, but because of certain opinions and beliefs. So being able to challenge and still have a valuable conversation without it turning it into a fight is really super important. And also being able to just find a way to gracefully disagree. Agree to disagree is still an option, right? So strategies for some of these awkward conversations. I've already talked about sort of understanding your triggers or understanding what might cause the issues when you're going into these situations, but also knowing the types of perpetrators for these triggering conversations can be very, very different. Whether they're completely oblivious to their behavior or they're just blatant provocateurs, right? So when you're dealing with an oblivious individual, I encourage using compassion and understanding rather than lashing out, because they're just going to feel hurt and not necessarily understand why you're treating them that way. So instead of lashing out when you're triggered, be like, hey, that's Aunt Bessie. They're always kind of that, and they don't understand how that's a trigger for me. Also, maybe discuss breaking down what feelings and motivations are going on in that conversation. And this could be, asking a question with a question. It could be, or answering a question with a question, rather. So, like, if someone asks about, say, your job, and it seems very triggering, and you could just reply with, well, Aunt Bessie, why is this so important to you? This is sort of a strange topic to be talking about. This could be even health related, like I said, job related, partner related. If it makes you uncomfortable, just say that. But do it in a very, very compassionate way of sorts. Right? And then I also suggested having an escape plan or a signal for someone to come and support you or call you to another duty, because it can be difficult to navigate and get out of certain conversations. But for more blatant conversations, provocateurs, definitely remember you do not owe anyone anything, especially when it's an extremely rude or blatant question that they know is totally inappropriate for the setting. Again, answering questions with questions can be good. Being direct without being rude is also very good. And make clear when a line has been crossed, but do it in a calm and clear way, not placing blame. So this would be like someone talking about, say, you had a health diagnosis, but you're not very open about discussing the situation. Be like, hi, that's kind of a tough topic for me, and I would appreciate if we navigate away from it. Or just say, what, like, ask a question like, how would you feel if someone asked you that same question? Especially like in relationships or job loss or something like that. So, sometimes being very direct can have a way of shutting down certain conversations. So, some of the key takeaways: remember, words have power. Rather than immediately jumping to judgment or conclusion, consider other viewpoints, other opinions, other reasons why people may be experiencing or talking about this. Consider what others may be feeling. And then also know when to hold them and know when to fold them. Ask yourself, is this actually an opportunity to educate? Or am I wasting time, energy, and joy on this interaction? So I encourage you, definitely try to get as much real world in-person interaction as you can, but also be very vigilant over your own boundaries and your own spoons, like your own energy levels. Because if you are constantly giving, this time of year was traditionally meant to be a time of slowing down. And it was the time after the crops and all of the heavy lifting was really put on the shelf for the year. And it was more of a time for slowing down and being more introspective and stuff like that. And as consumerism has sort of taken over capitalistic mentality, everything's about giving gifts, spending money, stuff like that. And we really forget the core reason of why we even celebrate the winter solstice and Christmas and gift giving and stuff like that. So I encourage you, look at your boundaries, what your energy levels can stand, and then work around that. And maybe it means that you start earlier if you want to keep up with some certain traditions, or maybe you drop certain traditions because they no longer serve you. But I also encourage considering recycling gifts, making homemade gifts and stuff like that are a little bit more accessible and not so elaborate. We've also been starting to do more of like Secret Santa or white elephant type swaps and stuff like that. And that still gives the effect of having a gift giving exchange without, these who can out buy or out purchase someone, but still showing love. So definitely remember this time of year, practice conscious communication and hold compassion for yourself as well as others. Many blessings, warm wishes throughout the holiday season and into the new year. Talk to you later. Bye.